Hey, one other comment on that whole merger thing. Didn't the NFL start off that way? Weren't was like the NFL and the AFL, and that's what became the NFC and the AFC?
Yes, a little bit. Yeah, it was the NFL, and then the AFL started up, and
And they decided to, rather than fight it out forever, they
right.
decided to merge.
Yep, they had the NFL versus the AFL for I think the first 3 years for that Super Bowl.
Right, and they would have something called a
Right.
championship, but it wasn't a Super Bowl.
Right, and then they had the 3 years of the championship where it was the NFL and the AFL, and then they finally they merged, and the NFC and AFC were created, all that stuff. So.
Right. There weren't any Jaguars back then, but I still remember.
No, there were not. Well, there were. There just weren't any in North America where they actually played this style of football.
The Jaguars were actually in the swamps where they belonged.
That's right. All right, so let's go through recap, and we've got the full past 2 weeks of NFL games to go through here. So, anything that impressed you, my sports dummy?
No, not really.
No, not even your Jaguars?
I was happy with my Jaguars because I watched the game in week 1, and in week 2, luckily it wasn't on TV where I'm at, so I couldn't see it, and it was all for the best.
Now, who did they play in week 1? I don't remember.
They played the Titans.
Oh, they did. Okay, and then that's interesting because the Ravens crushed the Steelers in week 1.
Yes,
absolutely destroyed them, and then they laid an egg against the Titans and lost 26-13 this week. So
I noticed that. Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
So it's quite interesting.
There's a lot of parity. All this prediction stuff. As the sports dummy, my common claim is going to be that you really can't predict it anyway, and that as a dummy, I'm going to be right as much as you are.
I think I'm going to be right just a little bit more than you are. Hopefully more than that. But yeah, I have a feeling it's.
Bring it, nephew. Bring it.
It's one of those things where, funny things happen. It's a football. It's not round. It's going to bounce in different directions and not unpredictably. So it's sometimes tough to predict what's going to happen. I do happen to say I've been very impressed by a couple of teams. The Detroit Lions, who everybody has been hyping for the past pretty much.
Weren't they completely winless a couple of years ago?
2 or 3 years ago, they went 0-16, I believe.
Boy, Detroit just can't get a break. All the problems with jobs and factories shutting down, and you think their football team could be good out of.
Well, all of a sudden they are. I mean, they're 2-0.
Really?
Yes, they've scored. Oh, how many points did they score? 51 points against the Kansas City Chiefs. Not that that's saying much. We'll get into that a little bit.
Is this a rebuilding thing? Because they got such good picks?
Yeah, it is. Well, they drafted really well. They had Calvin Johnson, nicknamed Megatron, at wide receiver, who's just an absolute athletic freak. He's one of their many top wide receiver picks that has panned out. He's just an absolute monster. They've got Matthew Stafford, the quarterback, which was a number 1 overall pick, and he's finally healthy. Everyone's always said he's got the talent, he's got the it factor. He threw a game-winning 2-point conversion with a separated shoulder at the end of a game. So he's got that it factor and the talent. It's just that he hasn't been healthy for the longest time. And he's finally, so far, through 2 games, healthy.
Oh, go Lions. I think that's awesome.
Yeah. And you've also got, of course, Ndamukong Suh, who is the defensive lineman. He's just an absolute terror. That's the steal of the draft from last year's draft. So
these are actual because usually it takes a couple years before players really mature, But they must have just hit the accelerator, huh?
Well, they had gone from being in a bit of trouble where they just couldn't hit with any of their picks to they've hit on basically every single pick for the past couple years, it seems. I mean, they really have done an excellent job.
I think we forget how much of this game is coaching and those guys who choose the players, and gel the team together and pick the plays, Well,
it's also funny too because you think about it. This is a young man's league. I mean, Matthew Stafford's in his 3rd or 4th year. Calvin Johnson's in his 5th or 6th, I think. And Ndamukong Suh's in his 2nd. I mean, this is a young man's game. You can get old really quickly. I mean, just ask the Pittsburgh Steelers, who got smushed by the Ravens. I mean, they did come back and they beat the Seahawks, but again, that's not saying a whole lot either.
You're saying that the players are young. Young players are key now.
I think so, yeah. You're taking a lot of punishment when you play in the NFL, especially at some of those skill positions, whether it's running back or linebacker and quarterback sometimes. So I really think that sometimes you can have these teams that play above what you would consider above themselves, but they're young, and then you have the teams who are older, who you think, more established, who can fall off a little bit from what you expected.
Right.
Like the
That's always what happens to
Seals.
me because I follow football so little that I know who won a lot of games last year, and when I make picks or thoughts about teams, I judge by dynasties and not by current events.
Right. Well, here's something along those lines. The winners of the AFC West and the NFC West are currently 0-2 and have looked like absolute crap. The Kansas City Chiefs and the Seattle Seahawks. They're both 0-2, and they look absolutely horrible. And they both won their divisions last year.
Wow.
Yeah. That's how, quickly. That's sometimes scheduling, too. The Chiefs and the Seahawks went from having relatively easy schedules to having tougher schedules. Because
plus it's just 2 games,
Yeah. It is 2 games, and that's something that's very interesting. Is, everyone makes a big deal. I'll take, for example, the Dallas Cowboys and Tony Romo. After that first game in which they had the game won against the New York Jets, Tony Romo threw it away, and after that game everyone said Tony Romo was the worst quarterback in the world. Now he comes back and he plays with a broken rib and leads the Cowboys back from being 14, 17 points down to win the game, and everyone is just like, celebrating his presence.
Oh, yeah.
So it really is one of those things where people will go week by week by week, and you can't really do that, especially early in the season.
Well, we a whole week goes by without any more football. We got to talk about something.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing.
Lots of talk.
And here's a big one. The Buffalo Bills are also 2-0.
They're going to go all the way to the Super Bowl and lose again?
No, they're probably going to go all the way to New England and lose to the Patriots this upcoming
Right.
So, all right. So I got to ask you, do you have a most valuable and a least valuable player from the past? You can pick the last 2 weeks.
I do not. I admit that you sent out some players to check and see whether you thought they were studs or muffins, and I did some research on those, but I don't have an overall. All
right. Well, we'll be getting back to those. Well, my thing is I'm going to pick an MVP and a MVP, which would be the I got to go a little bit of I'll go with 2. I'll go with a homer pick of Tony Romo because I've had back and not as badly rib injuries, but I've had those sorts of things, and it really does hurt to breathe, let alone move. So that's something else that he did to lead the Cowboys back. And then the other MVP I'm going to give is Ben Tate on the Houston Texans. They're starting running back in one of the top fantasy picks. Oh, what's his name? I'm blanking on his name. Arian Foster goes down with a hamstring injury. Ben Tate comes in and picks up the slack without any problem, and the Texans are 2-0 and ready to take the AFC South division title. My least valuable players will be, I'm going to go with the Seattle special teams from Week 1, basically giving the game away to, I believe it was the San Diego Chargers. And or no, it might have been the Minnesota Vikings. I don't remember. And then just the Colts and the Chiefs have looked absolutely terrible, absolutely terrible. And the Colts haven't looked that good either, especially without Peyton Manning.
Okay, I have mine.
Okay.
My MVP is the pro scout for the Lions.
Yeah, he actually deserves a lot of credit. Their scouting department and their general manager. I actually don't know who it is now. It used to be Matt Miller.
I was going for unsung,
That's a good one.
And my least favorite one would be David Garrard.
Yes. Well, you guys saved a lot of money by cutting him.
Oh wait, no, I got McCown. That's who I was going to say.
Luke McCown,
right.
Yes.
Here I am. It's my team. I don't even know my quarterbacks. Right. He played awful, and they yanked him, which I don't know if I agree with, but he did play awful.
Well, yeah, that happens. All right, so let's go through 2 weeks of the season. We've got, again, we can't, it's tough to say, but I'm going to try and go through and see at least my self-predictions. If you want to chime in and bring in your predictions, you can go right ahead.
Predictions for who's going to win games?
No, for the NFC East, like total.
Oh.
For the season, yes.
Okay.
So I'm going to go down the list here. For the NFC East, out of the Eagles, Cowboys, Redskins, and Giants, I've got the Eagles winning it. I think it's going to be really close between the Cowboys and the Eagles. The D for both teams is good. The offensive line is a question mark. The secondary for the Cowboys is a question mark on defense. The front seven is a question mark on defense for the Eagles. and both are now having quarterback issues with Michael Vick's concussion, which we actually completely forgot and didn't touch on. So I'm going to pick the Eagles, and then I'm going to pick the Cowboys to finish second. Both are going to get to double-digit wins. I think both are going to make the playoffs.
Okay, I'm going to make picks, but I'm only going to pick one.
Okay.
And I don't have the in-depth analysis that you did, so I just called my psychic, and she said that the Cowboys were going to win the NFC East this year.
All right. Good to hear. I like that pick. All right. So in the NFC West, I've got the 49ers, bit of a dark horse. I think Jim Harbaugh gets that team going, the new coach. I think Sam Bradford regresses a little bit as the quarterback of the Rams, and I don't think Steven Jackson can stay healthy enough to lead the team to a victory. And just Tavares Jackson as the starting quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks just isn't going to work out. And the Cardinals are breaking in Kevin Kolb, and their defense just has not looked particularly good. So I think the 49ers will take the NFC West.
Are you writing these down? I'm going to go with Arizona.
Yes, I have this written down. You got Arizona, Kevin Kolb, and Larry Fitzgerald?
I picked it because it both begins and ends with A.
Ah.
Just kidding. No, I like the Cardinals.
All right. You like the Cardinals, the bird?
I like I like them as a team.
Ah, okay. All right. So in the NFC North, I got myself the Packers. I think the Lions are just too young. The Vikings' defense will struggle, and Donovan McNabb has not looked good at all. And I really think that the Bears are not as good as their record and how far they got last year at all. I don't think they have an offensive line or a running game. They don't really have any wide receivers. I mean, the Bears look like they're going to be a 500 team at best. The Vikings look like they'd be lucky to get to 4 wins. I think the Packers win the NFC North easy.
I like the way we're doing this because I get to hear all your in-depth analysis before I make my pick. It's awesome.
I know, it's pretty good.
It's working out. I'm going to pick Detroit just for the Cinderella story factor.
Ah, okay.
Just for the Disney factor.
Good one. So for the NFC South, I've got the Saints. I can't trust the Falcons. They got beaten by the Bears last week or 2 weeks ago. This last week they did beat the Eagles. But I think the Saints are going to take the NFC South. I really think that they've got a lot of good teams from the Falcons and the Saints and the Buccaneers and even the Panthers who have been competitive. I think they're all going to beat on each other, and I think the Saints come out on top.
Well, I know we can rule out Carolina because, they're going to lose to the Jaguars this weekend. That'll be 0-3. That's hard to come back from. I'll go with the Saints with you on that one, Zach.
Okay. So for the NFC wild cards, I've got the Cowboys and I've got the Lions. I really do think the NFC South is going to just beat up on each other, the Bucs and the Falcons. So I think that only the Saints are going to get out of what could be the toughest division in the NFC. And I think that, I really think that the Eagles are going to go 12-4, 11-5. The Cowboys will be 11-5, 10-6-ish. The Lions are probably going to reach double-digit wins this year. I just think that the Bucs and the Falcons are going to just beat up on each other. The Saints will probably win that division at 10-6, and I don't see the Falcons or Bucs making it to double-digit wins and missing the playoffs. So I think the Cowboys and Lions will take the NFC West, take the NFC wild cards.
I don't feel confident enough to go down to wild cards.
Okay.
I didn't pay my psychic enough, apparently.